Hey, it's Martine. So you might remember last week we had something very special on Post Reports, and that was the first episode of our new Daily Olympics podcast. The show is called The Sports Moment, and that episode was a preview of what to expect in Paris over these next couple of weeks. Today, we are bringing you another installment of The Sports Moment, now from inside the games. Our colleagues are diving into the swimming rivalry between the U.S. and Australia. It's very tense, very exciting. And we'll also visit a basketball court to hear from a first-time Olympian named Kareem Maddox and hear about the gamble that he made to achieve his dream. As you're listening, please take a moment to look up The Sports Moment wherever you're listening right now and hit follow. My colleague, amazing sports writer Ava Wallace, is the host, and the podcast is a great way to stay on top of the Olympics from experts on the ground without having to worry about catching all of the events live on TV. All right, Ava and company will take it from here. Enjoy.
Can you, explain your guys' day to me?
Well, it's easy. I mean, Olympics swimming is divided into 2 days. So Dave and I get up every day, put on our Speedos, head to the pool.
Right, yep.
We cover prelim heats in the morning.
Yep.
And then head back in the
from
evening.
the pool, you're saying? Yeah, you get in there?
I love the smell of chlorine in the morning.
Oh, gosh.
That's a country western
Too
song.
early for that. Welcome to the Sports Moment from the Washington Post, your ticket to the Summer Games. It is Tuesday, July 30th. I'm Ava Wallace, a sports reporter here in Paris, and today I'm joined by two of the Post sports feature reporters, Dave Sheinin. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
And Rick Maese is back. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Ava, good to be back.
Today, we're talking about swimming, which has been responsible for some of the most thrilling moments at this Games already. I love swimming. It's been hard to kind of look away from every night. We're going to talk about the biggest rivalries in the pool, the biggest stars. And before we get there, we actually had some news this morning. They have postponed the men's triathlon until tomorrow because of pollution levels in the Seine. All that rain we talked about the other day really mucked things up. So they won't be swimming that. That'll be on Wednesday. Any of you surprised to hear that?
Not really. I mean, it's a little disappointing because the opening up that river is supposed to be like kind of a hallmark of these games. And so I think people are really looking forward to seeing competition taking place in the river. So, hopefully it clears up and these events still take place as planned. But we'll see what the coming days hold.
I would never jump in that thing, so I wouldn't want anybody else to either.
Speedo or no? Gotcha. Dave, how long have you been covering swimming for us?
I started covering swimming in 2015. That's when Katie Ledecky was building up to Rio, and she was really like the global standard. And I went to Kazan, Russia for that year's World Championships, and that was pretty much my introduction to the sport. And I've sort of been covering mostly Katie, it seems like, for the last 9 years, but also the entire sport.
And Rick, you also cover sports?
I've dipped into swimming, dipped my toe in the water here and there over the years, but dating back to Michael Phelps, his run before the 2008 Olympics, I've been around the pool and here every single day.
Why does swimming capture the popular imagination so well? It's a really popular sport. I mean, they held trials at a football stadium.
I don't have a great answer for that. I mean, I think, for one thing, it's a really popular youth sport, so a lot of families are involved. And I think that, Michael Phelps alone is responsible for a huge part of this growth. I mean, 23 gold medals. I mean, no one has ever come close to that. He was so far ahead of everybody else in the sport that he just pulled the rest of the sport up with him, and I think that changed everything for the sport.
Let's not overlook the fact that the United States is good at it. So we tend to watch the things we're good at, and this is not necessarily a new thing, and it's also easy to understand. There's a lot of Olympic sports that, we got to consult the rule book before they take place to find out what exactly is going on. That's not swimming.
Yeah.
You jump in the pool, first to the wall, that's who wins the gold medal. So it's easy to process, and it's certainly a great thing for NBC to put on TV for fans every night.
And like you said, we do get to know these outstanding stars in their sport. So I wanted to start, of course, with Katie Ledecky. We're plenty familiar with her. She's an established kind of star here, the face of every Summer Games where she swims. But there are some newer faces emerging here in Paris as well, right? Dave, you tell me about Summer McIntosh, Leon Marchand, the new rising star class.
Yeah, I mean, well, you mentioned the two biggest names. I mean, those are the two consensus best all-around swimmers in the world.
Wow.
And neither one of them is American, and neither one of them is Australian for that matter, which is the big rival of the U.S. But Leon Marchand and Summer McIntosh both trained in America. They sort of benefited from the American system. Leon Marchand went to school at Arizona State, trained under Bob Bowman, who was Michael Phelps' old coach. Summer McIntosh, the Canadian, she swam in Sarasota for the last 2 years. So they are very familiar faces around American pools. And Marchand is the Frenchman. He's 22 years old. He just produced one of the greatest Olympic moments that I've ever seen when he won the 400 IM 2 nights ago. And he is just electric. I mean, the atmosphere there was unlike anything I'd really ever seen at an Olympics. It ranked up there with Bolt in 2008 for me.
Our hotel is right by the arena where they hold all the swimming events. And I was walking back the other night and it was such a big crowd. And there were so many French people. I was like, oh, rugby sevens must be happening. And then I was like, wait a second, that's where the pool is. That can't be a rugby game. But it was all these French people from Marchand. And Dave, you had a really great detail in your story about him, how he was like so relaxed walking up there, smiling and waving. Rick, what did you notice about the atmosphere in the pool that day? Tell me about some of that electricity.
It was insane. Dave's right. Everyone was just going nuts. And it was, as he was announced, as he stepped on the starting block, when he popped out of the pool. I mean, when he was doing the breaststroke, if you can picture the breaststroke, you know, the head's bobbing out of the water and there's kind of a rhythm to it. Every time Marchand's head popped up, you hear the crowd, you know, shout. What were they saying? Like,
Allez.
Yeah, allez.
Let's go.
It was just incredible to watch. And, you know, you couldn't help but, as an observer, have a smile on your face, taking in all the energy that was in the building in that moment.
That's awesome. Okay, so I said we'd get back to Ledecky. So she's got 1 bronze medal so far and 2 races left on her schedule. What do you make of her performance thus far at the meet?
Pretty much as expected. There was a very little chance she was going to be a gold medalist in the 400 freestyle.
Why is that?
Well, she's 27 years old, which, you know, sounds young to us, but in swimming, that's almost ancient. And in distance swimming, it's even worse. I mean, distance swimming is a young person's game, and that's why she dominated it at age 19. And again, at 23 for that matter. But at 27, she's had to make some concessions. She's had to drop the 200 free from her individual program. She still swims that as a relay swimmer, though. The 400, she's not at the level of Ariane Titmus, who won the gold medal that night.
That's the big Australian rival,
That's the Australian rival. So she is very much a pure distance swimmer at this point. Back in her prime, like, she could expand downward into the middle distance events, the 2 and the 4. But at this point in her career, she's pretty strictly a distance swimmer. She should win the 1500 by a lot. She should win the 800, though maybe not by as much. And, you know, she's going to keep going. She's vowed to be back in LA in 2028 at the age of 31, which, as amazing as it is for her to do this at 27, that would be pretty much unprecedented.
Okay, explain something to me there. She's swimming a young person's game, but I would think that she would then want to swim the shorter events.
Well, her gift is endurance, loving the training so much. I mean, distance swimmers are notorious, you know, for the yardage they do in practice every day. It's even beyond what a sprint Olympian would do. Is ungodly amount of yardage every single day in practice. She never takes a week off. So that's the gift she has. She doesn't have the pure speed of a sprinter.
So she's kind of just homing in on her skill set, not necessarily like taking load off the schedule.
Entrenching, right.
Gotcha.
You know, downsizing into her core events.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So we're about a third of the way through the swim meet. We've got a lot of important events ahead of us, but from what we've seen, Rick, which countries are kind of dominating in the pool?
Well, I think it's the ones we expected. It's the United States and Australia right up at the top. I mean, heading into Tuesday's competition, Australia has 6. The U.S. is actually trailing in the gold medal count.
Ooh.
You know, different countries prioritize one over the other. The United States tend to look at the overall. I think the Aussies might be more focused on the gold medal count.
Golds, yeah.
The Aussies have 3 there. The United States has 2. But again, there's a lot more swimming to take place. So those numbers are going to change, every single night.
My great rivalry the other night was trying to get dinner at a restaurant right outside of the pool arena. And I was going up against all of these swim parents. And that was... I did get in there because they had numbers, but
you were kind of swimming upstream,
feisty.
Would you say?
I was swimming upstream, definitely. They were definitely out drinking me. Shout out to all the swim parents. You guys seem very fun.
Swim parents get after it, let me tell you.
If you got to wake up at 5 a.m. to go to meets for years and years and years, you know how to get through it.
Yeah, you've got that endurance gene as well. That's so true. Okay, so Rick, you mentioned that Australia cares a lot more about the gold medals and they're leading the U.S. right now in that category. But how did that rivalry come about? And can you guys explain where it is currently?
I mean, the U.S. and Australia for a number of years, for a couple of decades, have been the number one and number two powers in the world.
Okay.
So it's been a bit of a rivalry. If you think about even Michael Phelps's days, some of his biggest rivals were Australian. So it's been there in the background for a long time, but the U.S. always crushed them. The U.S. always won the most medals by far, both golds and overalls. But in recent years, since the end of the Phelps era, Australia's been creeping up. U.S. has been creeping down a little bit because they didn't have Michael Phelps up there winning 8.
Sure, yeah.
So in Fukuoka last year at the World Championships, for the first time in like 2 decades, the Australians won more gold medals than the U.S. It was kind of a cataclysmic thing for the U.S., but in Australia it was massive. They got so much energy out of that, and they hated the way the Americans like rang cowbells for their finals to cheer on their teammates. One of the veteran Australian swimmers popped off in an interview and said the Americans are sore losers and how great it was to not hear the Star-Spangled Banner so much. I mean, it was bulletin board type of stuff, and that resonated in the U.S. immediately, and it has now fueled the U.S. It's become, a rallying cry for them to try to get back to the top in these Olympics. So it's percolating under the surface now. It has not really become like a rah-rah type of thing yet at this meet, but there's a long way to go, and it's going to be something to watch the entire swim meet.
I mean, that sounds really fun, first of all, but it isn't just those two countries who are kind of creeping to the top of the medal table. China's collecting a lot of hardware as well. Is that right?
Well, they're actually not collecting as many as we probably anticipated. I mean, the specter of the Chinese doping scandal was going to hang over this meet no matter what. Many of the swimmers that tested positive for this drug TMZ heading into the Tokyo Olympics, they're still competing here in Paris.
Yeah, and that doping scandal, for anyone who hasn't been kind of following along, has been a huge story leading into the games, really. So it was a group of Chinese swimmers who went into training coming out of the pandemic where no one was allowed to train together, right? And then they were in this hotel. They started testing positive for drugs. The Chinese Federation said, it was in the kitchen in the hotel somehow, and that contaminated our drug samples. And so that's why they tested positive. And as Rick said, many of those same athletes who tested positive are here racing Paris.
Yeah, none of them were suspended or sanctioned in any way. So many athletes before the games were outspoken, saying how uncomfortable they were, how they didn't trust the competition was going to be fair. So we've all been curious every time there's a top Chinese swimmer in the pool, how are they going to do? And so far, China doesn't have a single gold medal. So I think they got 2 silvers, 2 bronzes, but they've not won a race yet. They probably will, and we're curious as anyone to find out, how everyone's going to react when they do get up there. And the swimmers that finish 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th in those races, what are they going to think of all this?
After the break, we're going to talk about all the swimming events that are not to be missed. Okay, so I want to talk about the races you guys are most excited to see that are coming up. And before we do that, I want to make a note that we are recording this about 9 a.m. Tuesday, Paris time. Which races should we be paying attention to tonight as the meet continues on later this week?
I think one at the pool this evening is one of the most anticipated and unpredictable races. It's the women's 100 backstroke race. It has the 2 most recent record holders. Regan Smith is an American. She actually broke this record in 2019 at the World Championships. Wow. But then it's they've batted it back and forth. I think she finished 3rd at the Tokyo Olympics. And then, this Australian, Kaylee McCowan, has just kind of blown everyone away for a few years. She set the record. And then out of nowhere, we thought maybe Regan was no longer as strong in the event. At U.S. trials last month, Regan takes the record back. So it's anyone's win tonight. Well, I don't need anyone's. It's one of these 2 women are very likely to win the gold medal. And, everyone's curious, can the record be lowered yet again?
I want to jump in there really quick. Is this pool slow? And how can a pool be slow?
Okay, well, here's the deal. Here's the deal. There's a lot of chatter about the pool being slow. A lot of the winning times have been down from both Tokyo in 21 and Fukuoka World Championships last summer a year ago.
Okay.
Some of the winning times are down. But we've been looking deeper into the numbers, and when you look at what it took to get into finals, those times and what it took to get 8th place to get into the final are right in line and in many cases faster than Fukuoka and Tokyo. So for whatever reason, the top end people maybe aren't hitting the world records and swimming faster, but the field as a whole is. So I think it's very much up in the air whether the pool is slow. And if it is slow, people have theorized that it is it's a shorter depth than the typical Olympic and World Championship pool. And for whatever reason, they built it slightly more shallow.
Very French.
That creates, I'm told, waves that don't have the depth to dissipate and so double back on each other and create a choppier surface.
It's not like they just put some molasses in the pool and
I
make it a
thought
little bit
everyone
harder.
was just tired.
Well, actually, some of the Australians have theorized that if there is this slower times, it's because the situation in the Olympic Village is just not conducive to high end. They
seriously?
honestly, yeah. Ariane Titmus mentioned this, that
cardboard beds and all.
It's hard living in that Olympic Village with the beds, the transportation, the food. Nothing is really conducive to high end performance.
Wow.
And so everybody's kind of suffering from that.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Dave. But give me now a race that you're excited for, and maybe one involving Caleb Dressel.
I personally love watching the 50 frees. They're the shortest sprints.
Yeah.
They're absolute mad dashes. In fact, in swimming circles, they're called the splash and dash. Dressel's in the 50 free, and it's pure racing, right? I mean, there's no time to even deal with strategizing. There's no tweaking of your stroke. There's no adjustments mid-race. It's just a blind dash from one end of the pool to the other. And Dressel is, in addition to being one of the greatest swimmers of his generation, he is one of the best pure racers of his generation, which means he just has a knack for getting his hand to the wall before the others. So I'm really looking forward to Dressel in the 50 free. Unfortunately, that's on the last day of the meet, I'm pretty sure. So we got a little bit of wait for that.
Big finish. When swimming wraps up, Rick, I know you're kind of bobbing around all the time, but are there events that you guys are looking forward to seeing outside of the pool? Leaving that pool deck, getting out into the fresh air.
If my chlorine-addled brain is still functioning at that point, I mean, I see these venues. I want to go to beach volleyball and I want to go to fencing. It's less because of the sport itself, but just the venues and the historic, I see those and I'm jealous. I mean, I'm stuck in this pool in a rugby stadium that's somewhat charmless for like 6 hours a day, every day for, 10 days. So yeah, I'm ready to get out there.
Yeah, beach volleyball, that's in front of the Eiffel Tower, and fencing at the Grand Palais. Rick, what about you? Where are you going to this week?
One great thing about the Olympic schedule is right when swimming ends, track picks up. So I'm really looking forward to track, and specifically the sprints. I can't wait to see what Noah Lyles is going to do in the track. We got him in the 100 and 200, and and we're going to see him in the relay as well. But he's such a showman and a performer, and he is just enjoying this stage here. So I feel like we're going to see something really special happen over there, and can't wait to see it.
Cool. Okay, last question for you guys, then I'll let you go over to prelims. You guys know, you veteran Olympic reporters, how many weird things kind of happen that never make our reporting interactions, observations. I covered skateboarding yesterday. It was the first event at the Paris Olympics where I was stepping over joints in the grandstand that were just littered on the ground. So I was like, yeah, skateboarding, that fits. Anything you guys got for me that falls into that category?
Well, you saw Bob the cat catcher at the pool the other night.
Sorry?
I did. I mean, so, okay, in the breaststroke race, an American in the prelims, she lost her swim cap somehow at the wall, which is like, never seen that happen in an Olympic race, but she loses her swim cap at the wall in the turn, goes back to the other side, finishes like 23rd and is out. But meanwhile, that cap at the bottom of the pool, I guess, is a problem. Like, they don't want it there. I don't know if that's for TV purposes or whatever, or she just wants it back. But some middle-aged dude with like a dad bod, like strips down to like, a little swimsuit, and with the crowd sort of like noticing and all of a sudden perking up and like cheering madly, he dives in from the side, swims over, gets the swim cap, comes up to a roar of applause.
Wow.
The place goes nuts, and he holds up the swim cap and like thank you, and then goes and puts his clothes back on.
You said swimming was charmless. That's pretty charming.
No. The sport isn't charmless.
I know.
The arena
The
is.
arena.
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty good. Dave Sheinin and Rick Maese are both sports feature reporters for The Post, and that's it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ava.
We are now 4 days into the games, counting from the opening ceremonies, so I wanted to give everyone a little update of the current rankings of who's leading the way with gold medals as of early Tuesday morning in Paris. So Japan is in first place. They're the only nation that have got 6 gold medals so far. That's 2 in skateboarding, 2 in judo, 1 in fencing, and another in gymnastics. And then there are a few countries tied in second with 5 gold medals. That's France, China, and Australia. And the United States is in 6th place with 3 gold medals, 2 in swimming and 1 in fencing. Before we go, we've got one more segment for you. Our producer, Ted Muldoon, was over at practice for the U.S. men's 3-on-3 basketball team yesterday. This was a sport that was introduced at the Tokyo Olympics, and it really took off. So it's inspired by pickup basketball. It's played on a half court. It's really short. The games are fun. The atmosphere is also really fun. They, play music, and it's a little bit more relaxed. So this is actually the first year that the U.S. men have qualified for the 3-on-3 tournaments. And Ted spoke to one of the U.S. men, Kareem Maddox. He's got a really interesting story. He kind of got to the Olympics in an unusual way. He's 34 years old, which is pretty rare for a first-time Olympic athlete, and he's a former public radio host who left his job in order to pursue his dream of playing basketball.
Kareem Maddox, USA Basketball 3x3. We're here in a gym in Paris somewhere, but it's a nice gym.
What's it like being here for you?
It's amazing to finally be here the night before we play is surreal.
What's your journey been like being here?
I mean, oh man, just a lot of, I think sacrifice is probably the operative word.
You left your job, right?
I left a couple jobs for basketball. I was working in public radio in 2016 and went to Poland to play a season of 5-on-5, and I was working at Gimlet Media, then Spotify, and quit that job to train full time for the 2020 games, which got postponed felt like the day after I quit.
I feel like leaving your job in order to pursue a sport later in your life is like a big decision for people. So what was that decision like for you?
Yeah, there were times where I was just questioning whether that was the right decision. Just sitting on the couch in Poland with a sore calf, wondering if this is, something that I can recover from, or because it was against the advice of a lot of people, and people thought it was like nuts. But, I get it too. Like, I'm rational, and, and I it's almost like I understood that it's crazy. Like, it was a clue on Wait, Don't Tell Me. There was like this public radio, of the 3 things, one of these is true. Like, and it's like, all right, is it a public radio host who quit public radio to go play basketball overseas? And, the listener was like, that's for sure not the one. That's got to be false. And so I know it was nuts, but it was like, it just felt right, and I felt I had it within me, and I had the ability, and I think everyone meant well, and I appreciate them for telling the truth and not just going along with it and saying, oh yeah, no, that's a great idea, because honestly it wasn't a great idea until it was.
Kareem Maddox and the U.S. men's 3-on-3 basketball team is playing Serbia today, Tuesday, July 30th at 4:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Here are some other can't-miss events today, and all these times are also in Eastern Time. So in women's gymnastics, Simone Biles and the U.S. squad have their first shot at a gold medal in the team final at 12:15 p.m. Eastern. And those swimming medals in races that Dave and Rick will be covering will be awarded in a session that begins at 2:56 p.m. Eastern Time, starting with the women's 100-meter backstroke final, then followed by the men's 800-meter freestyle final, and the men's 4x200 freestyle relay final. That's it for today on The Sports Moment. If you want more up-to-date information about the latest news from Paris, you should also subscribe to my newsletter, which is also called The Sports Moment. You can find a link to the Sports Moment newsletter in our show notes. If you're tuning in via Post Reports, I'll be bringing you more coverage of the Paris Games throughout the week up until the closing ceremonies. Go follow the Sports Moment show feed wherever you're listening. Today's episode was produced and mixed by Ted Muldoon. It was edited by Joe Tone. I'm Ava Wallace. Until next time from Paris.